Chapter 1. The Ultimatum. They thought they could save the family empire by sacrificing me. My own parents gave me an ultimatum. Marry the son of their powerful partner or lose everything. What they never expected was that my own brother had already betrayed me, signing away our legacy behind my back. The night I faced that impossible choice, I didn't obey. I turned their perfect wedding into the moment I exposed them all. The dining room felt colder than usual that night, even though the fire in the stone hearth was burning high. My father Richard sat at the head of the table, his fork resting untouched on his plate, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscles twitch beneath his skin. My mother Margaret sat beside him with her back ramrod straight, her pearls catching the light. Across from me, my brother Andrew leaned back in his chair with that smug half smile I had learned to hate since childhood. I was 30 years old, but in that moment I felt like I was 15 again, waiting for judgment to fall. My father cleared his throat, the kind of sound that usually meant he had made up his mind long before anyone else had a chance to speak. He said, "Mercer and Cole is on the edge of collapse. The projects Andrew oversaw bled money. Investors are pulling back, and the banks have grown restless." His eyes cut to me like a blade. "The only path forward is simple. You will marry Daniel Whitmore. The Whitmore family is prepared to inject capital if this union is secured. Refuse, and you walk away from your inheritance, your position, your future with this family." The words landed with a weight that pressed the air from my chest. For a moment I stared at him, certain I had misheard. My hands trembled under the table, clutching the linen napkin in my lap until the fabric twisted. I finally said softly, "Father, you cannot be serious. Marriage as a transaction." My voice cracked. "You are asking me to sell my life to rescue a company Andrew drove into the ground?" Andrew let out a short laugh, swirling the wine in his glass. He said, "Careful, little sister. That company is the reason you live in this house and enjoy everything you take for granted. If you cared about more than your sketches and daydreams, you would understand what is at stake." His tone dripped with condescension. He turned to our father. "She was never cut out for this world anyway. Maybe Daniel can keep her in line." My mother leaned forward, her manicured fingers clasped together as though she were praying. "Elena," she said, her voice soft but steely, "this is not about you. This is about all of us. The Whitmores are respected. Their support would restore the confidence we have lost. If you refuse, everything your father and brother have built will crumble. Do you want that burden on your conscience?" Anger flared through me so suddenly I could taste it. I looked at my mother and said, "I am not a pawn on your chessboard. I have given up enough already. I studied design, I had a life I wanted, and every time I tried to pursue it, you dragged me back here to keep the family image polished. Now you want to bind me to a man I barely know, just so Andrew can keep playing executive while the Whitmores take over everything." My father slammed his palm on the table, silverware rattling. "Enough." His voice was sharp and final. "This is not a debate, it is a directive. Either you accept this marriage and secure the future of Mercer and Cole, or you walk out that door with nothing. You will no longer be part of this family. Do not mistake my patience for weakness. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories." The fire crackled loudly in the silence that followed. I forced myself to breathe, though every inhale scraped against my ribs. Andrew leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough that only I could hear. He said, "I already have an arrangement with Daniel and his mother. This marriage is just the final piece. You are the last signature needed. Do not flatter yourself into thinking you have real power here. You never did." My stomach turned. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, each beat a drum of betrayal. For years, I had known my family valued appearances more than happiness. But hearing Andrew admit he had struck a deal behind my back carved a wound deeper than I expected. He looked at me with the same expression he had worn when we were children, and he broke my toys just to watch me cry. Only now the stakes were a company, a legacy, and my freedom. I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. My voice shook, but I forced it steady. "If you think I will chain myself to a man for your mistakes, you are wrong." My father narrowed his eyes. "You will think carefully," he said. "Tomorrow we expect your answer." His tone left no space for refusal. My mother avoided my gaze, her lips pressed together in a thin line. Andrew smirked, as if the outcome were already decided. I left the dining room with my fists clenched, the echoes of their words following me down the long corridor. Every portrait of ancestors on the walls seemed to watch, their painted eyes heavy with silent judgment. For the first time in years, I realized just how alone I was inside my own home. Upstairs in my room, I closed the door, pressed my back against it, and slid to the floor. My heart pounded and my thoughts swirled in chaos. They had given me an ultimatum. Choose their way or lose everything. And in that suffocating silence, I understood that nothing in my life would ever be the same again. Chapter 2. The Ultimatum. I sat on the floor with my back against the door, my breath catching in uneven bursts, and my mind drifted backward to the years when I believed I had a choice. The years when life had color and possibility instead of contracts and ultimatums. I was 20 when I arrived at the Rhode Island School of Design. The first morning I walked across the campus, clutching my sketchbook so tight the corners bent. I thought I had finally stepped into the life I wanted. The studio smelled of paint and sawdust. The halls echoed with the sound of students dragging canvases bigger than themselves. I felt like I belonged. That was where I met Michael. He was in his second year of law at Brown, working nights at a coffee shop near the design building. One evening, I was sketching in the corner while sipping a latte that had long gone cold. Michael approached with a smile that made the harsh fluorescent lights feel softer. He said, "You have been here for hours. Do you want a refill on that, or are you just keeping me company?" I looked up, startled, and laughed. I said maybe both. He sat across from me, his textbook spread out, and asked about my drawings. No one had ever leaned in so closely, really seeing me, really listening when I described how furniture could shape the way people felt in a room. Our friendship grew quickly. He would walk me home after late classes, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets, his voice warm in the chilly Providence nights. By spring, friendship had become something more. He kissed me under a street lamp after a long night at the studio, and I remember thinking for the first time that happiness could be simple. But simplicity was not what my family valued. When I brought Michael home for Thanksgiving, the look on my father's face hardened the moment Michael mentioned law school loans. My mother smiled politely, but her eyes betrayed her disapproval. That night in the kitchen, Richard pulled me aside. He said, "Elena, you are too smart to tie yourself to a man who has nothing to offer. You need someone who can lift this family's name, not drag it down." I snapped back for the first time in my life. I said, "He does not drag me down. He makes me feel like I can do anything." My father's jaw clenched. His voice dropped. "You are young. You will learn." The arguments did not stop. Every holiday turned into a battleground. Margaret told me gently, in the way she thought sounded kind, that love fades, but security lasts. I told her I wanted both, and she shook her head as if I were a child. Michael tried to ignore the tension, but he could feel it every time my father dismissed him in conversation, or Andrew made snide remarks about his secondhand suits. By 2016, the pressure was unbearable. One night after dinner, my father confronted me in the living room. He said, "Elena, this is the last time we will speak about this. If you insist on continuing with Michael, do not expect my support. Do not expect a place in this family." My chest tightened, my hands shook, but before I could answer, Michael stepped forward. He looked at Richard with steady eyes and said, "Sir, I do not want to be the reason your daughter loses her family." He turned to me and his voice broke. "I love you, but I cannot fight them forever." I grabbed his arm, tears burning down my cheeks. "Michael, please, do not let them decide for us." He cupped my face with both hands, his thumb brushing away the tears. "Elena, I need you to have the life you deserve, not one chained to their disapproval." And then he was gone. I watched the taillights of his car disappear down the driveway, and something inside me collapsed. The years that followed blurred together. I graduated in 2018, clutching my degree with pride, and for a brief moment, I believed I could carve out my own future. I drafted a plan for a small studio in Boston, even scouted a location with big windows that faced the morning sun. I brought the plan to my father. He glanced at the pages for less than a minute before sliding them back across the desk. He said the company needs you. You will start with Andrew on Monday. That was the end of it. Each attempt to bring up my studio was shut down with the same cold dismissal. Margaret told me to be patient, that my time would come. Andrew laughed openly and called my sketches hobbies. My father never raised his voice, but the look in his eyes told me resistance was pointless. By 2022, I had buried my dream under piles of construction proposals and board meeting minutes. I stopped sketching in public, stopped telling anyone what I wanted. I became what they needed, silent and reliable, and with every passing year, a little more of me faded away. Yet fragments remained. Some nights I would sit by the window with my old sketchbook, tracing the outlines of furniture designs I never built. I imagined clients who would value my vision, spaces transformed by my ideas. Those nights ended with me closing the book quickly whenever footsteps echoed in the hallway, as if even my dreams were forbidden. The memory of Michael haunted me most. Not just his absence, but the way he had believed in me when no one else did. His voice would replay in my mind when I felt myself breaking under the weight of the family's demands. You can do anything. I clung to that even as I convinced myself it no longer mattered. And then came the night after the ultimatum, when I sat on my bedroom floor in the heavy silence. My eyes drifted to the bookshelf where an old box sat covered in dust. I pulled it down, the cardboard rough against my fingertips, and opened it. Inside was my sketchbook from college, its pages curled at the edges. On the first page was a design I had drawn for the logo of my studio. Clean lines, bold letters, a symbol of independence. My chest tightened as I ran my hand over the faded ink. All the years of compromise, of silence, of being treated like a bargaining chip crashed down on me. But so did something else. The reminder that once I had believed in myself enough to imagine a life of my own. I closed the book carefully, clutching it to my chest. For the first time in years, I felt a spark flicker back to life. It was small, fragile, but it was mine. And I knew that whatever came next, I could not bury it again. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories. Chapter 3: The Ultimatum. The chandeliers in the ballroom glittered like frozen waterfalls, light bouncing off every crystal until the entire space seemed to glow. The Whitmores had spared no expense. The March air outside New York was sharp, but inside the hotel, the heat of bodies and cameras made me sweat beneath the silk gown Margaret had chosen. I stood near the edge of the marble floor, my palms damp, my smile fixed, while reporters snapped photographs of Daniel Whitmore shaking hands with my father. Daniel looked polished, his tuxedo tailored within an inch of perfection, his dark hair slicked back with deliberate care. He approached me with the confidence of a man who already believed he owned what he wanted. "Elena," he said smoothly, bending slightly to brush a kiss against my cheek. "You look stunning tonight." Just as I imagined. I forced a small smile. "Thank you. Quite a spectacle." "Nothing less for the future of our families," he replied, his eyes gleaming with a calculation that unsettled me. Margaret swept in before I could answer, clutching my arm as if to keep me in place. "Smile, Elena. The photographers are waiting. This is an evening everyone will remember." I held my breath as flashes erupted. My face ached from pretending, but I kept still. Behind me, Andrew's laughter carried across the room. He was drinking champagne too quickly, slapping backs, charming anyone who would listen. I caught his eye and he lifted his glass toward me in a mocking toast. Barbara Whitmore, tall and elegant in navy silk, approached with a leather folder in her manicured hands. Her voice was calm but firm. "Richard, Margaret, perhaps we should finalize the family agreement before the evening progresses too far. Best to have clarity before the announcements." My father nodded, motioning toward a side table draped in linen. Barbara opened the folder and slid several documents across the surface. She turned to me, her expression cool, detached. "Elena," she said, "this outlines the expectations of the union. Naturally, it protects both families, ensures stability, and defines your shared responsibilities." I glanced down and my stomach tightened. Words leapt from the page: joint ownership, governance rights, board participation. One section granted Daniel voting power equal to my father's within Mercer and Cole. Another bound me legally to decisions Daniel made regarding the company's assets. I looked up, my throat dry. This is not a marriage contract. This is a business merger. Barbara's smile never faltered. In families like ours, the two are inseparable. Surely you understand that. Richard placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. Sign it, Elena. This secures everything. It is formality, nothing more. I pulled back slightly, searching my mother's face for hesitation. But Margaret only said, "It is what is best. Do not make a scene." Daniel leaned closer, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "It is nothing to fear. With me by your side, you will never have to worry again. I know how to handle power. You will learn to appreciate that." The room spun for a moment, the clink of glasses and hum of conversation blurring into a dull roar. I steadied myself against the table, forcing my voice not to crack. "And if I refuse?" Barbara's eyes hardened. "Refusal is not wise. Think carefully, Elena. The world is watching tonight." As she spoke, movement caught my eye. Across the room, Andrew bent over another folder, set on a smaller table with a Whitmore associate. He uncapped a pen, his grin wide, and scrawled his signature without hesitation. My breath caught. I shifted slightly, straining to see. The heading was bold, unmistakable. Transfer of shares. He looked up just in time to see me watching. For a heartbeat, we locked eyes, and his grin widened. He raised the pen in mock salute before handing the folder back. My pulse thundered in my ears. This was not only about marriage. Andrew had already traded his loyalty. The Whitmores were not just buying influence. They were buying the company itself. I stepped back, gripping the edge of my gown to steady my shaking hands. Daniel reached for me again, placing his hand lightly at the small of my back as if he already owned me. "Come," he said smoothly. "It is time for the announcement. Everyone is waiting." My lips curved into a smile that did not reach my eyes. The cameras flashed, the guests clapped as our families took the stage, and Barbara spoke of unity, legacy, and the bright future of two great houses. But inside, all I could feel was the burn of betrayal, the suffocating knowledge that I had just witnessed my brother sell us out. The applause roared louder, and Daniel lifted our joined hands into the air. I stood frozen in the center of that glittering trap, my face painted with composure, while inside, I knew I had stepped into something far darker than a celebration. This was no engagement. This was a cage. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories. Chapter 4. The Ultimatum. I left New York with my face still stiff from smiling, but inside I carried a storm I could no longer hold back. Back in Boston, I called the only person I trusted to see me as more than a pawn. Claire Benson had been my roommate in college before law school pulled her away. She was now a junior partner at a mid-sized firm downtown, sharp-eyed and relentless, the kind of woman who could slice through deception with a single look. When she opened her apartment door and saw me standing there in my gown, hair still pinned from the engagement, her brows shot up. "Elena, you look like you just walked out of a magazine spread." "What happened?" I stepped inside, the weight of the folder Barbara had forced into my hands pressing against my palm. "I need your help. It is worse than I thought. They are selling me off, but it is not just marriage. It is the company. Everything." She gestured to the sofa, poured me a glass of water, and waited as I laid out the events of the evening. I slid the contract across the table. Claire scanned it quickly, her lips pressing tighter with every line. "This isn't a prenuptial agreement," she said finally. "This is a corporate acquisition. If you sign this and the marriage goes through, the Whitmores will hold controlling interest. 51%. It is dressed up as tradition, but it is a hostile takeover wrapped in roses." My stomach twisted. Hearing it aloud gave it shape, made it undeniable. I need proof. More than this. I saw Andrew sign something tonight. He is in on it. If I can find evidence of what he has been doing, maybe I can stop it. Claire leaned forward. "You understand if you go down this road, you cannot turn back. Once you dig into Mercer and Cole's books, they will know someone is inside." "I have no choice," I said. "They already decided my life. If I stay silent, I lose everything anyway." 2 nights later, we slipped into the Mercer and Cole offices long after the staff had gone home. My keycard still worked, though my pulse hammered every time the light flashed green. Claire moved quickly, pulling files from the archives, her phone camera snapping page after page. I logged into my father's computer with the password I had memorized years ago, fingers shaking as I opened spreadsheets. Numbers bled red across the screen. Multi-million-dollar transfers from operating accounts into shell projects that never broke ground. Payments to vendors that did not exist. Dates lined up with Andrew's rise inside the company. 2023 and 2024 bleeding us dry while he smiled through board meetings. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories, Claire whispered from across the room. This isn't just mismanagement. This is fraud. He has been siphoning funds. If the Whitmores plug their money into this after the marriage, they will own the mess and cover his tracks. You will disappear, Elena. They will erase you completely. I swallowed hard, scrolling faster, desperate to gather enough before anyone noticed. That was when I heard the click of shoes against the polished floor. Andrew's voice carried down the hall. I forgot the Benson file. Give me a second. I know it is in here. My blood ran cold. Claire's eyes widened. She stuffed documents back into drawers and pulled me behind a tall filing cabinet just as the door swung open. Andrew stepped inside, his tie loosened, humming off key. He flicked on the lights and moved toward the far cabinet. I held my breath so tightly my chest burned. The folder in my hands felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Claire's arm pressed against mine, steady, reminding me not to move. Andrew rifled through drawers, muttering to himself, until he pulled out a thin binder. He flipped it open, frowned, then shut it again. For a terrible moment, he looked toward the corner where we crouched, but his phone buzzed. He answered quickly, chuckling into the receiver as he walked out, leaving the lights blazing. Claire exhaled sharply once the door closed. That was too close. My knees trembled as I stood. If he had found us. He didn't, she said firmly. Focus. Take what you need and go. Back at her apartment, we spread the files across her dining table. One draft stopped me cold. At the top, bold letters read, Shareholder Transition Agreement. My eyes skimmed down the page, every word confirming my worst fear. Upon the marriage of Elena Mercer and Daniel Whitmore, Whitmore Group shall assume 51% controlling ownership of Mercer & Cole, with Andrew Mercer retaining operational oversight under Whitmore advisement. I pressed my hand to my mouth, bile rising in my throat. They already wrote me out. I am not the future, I am the exchange. Claire's face was grim. This isn't an ultimatum anymore. It is a plan already in motion. They are waiting for your signature to make it airtight. The room blurred as tears burned my eyes. My whole life, every sacrifice, every dream I buried, had led to this moment. I was nothing more than collateral. I dropped into a chair, clutching the draft, the ink smearing slightly beneath my damp fingers. For the first time in years, anger cut through the despair. I looked at Claire and said, If they think I will let them destroy me quietly, they are wrong. She nodded, her expression fierce. Then we fight. But we will need more than rage. We will need strategy. I leaned back, the paper still in my hands, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and defiance. I finally had proof of what they intended. And for the first time, I began to believe that silence was no longer an option. Chapter 5. The Ultimatum. A week before the wedding, I walked into Andrew's office without knocking. He was sitting behind the massive oak desk our father had gifted him when he was promoted, his feet propped on the edge as if he owned the place. He looked up with an arched brow, clearly irritated. Elena, he said, his tone slick with amusement. To what do I owe this honor? Cold feet already. I closed the door and kept my hand steady as I slipped my phone into the pocket of my blazer, the recording app open. I know what you signed in New York. I know about the transfer agreement. You sold us out? Andrew laughed, a sharp sound that filled the room. Finally caught on, did you? You always were slow with business. Yes, I signed. And why not? The Whitmores have vision. They have money. With them, Mercer & Cole has a future. Without them, it sinks. Father sees it. Mother sees it. You are the only one clinging to some fantasy that you matter here. My throat tightened, but I forced my voice to stay even. You betrayed me. You betrayed this family. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. No, Elena, I secured my future. You were never part of it. You think father ever believed in your little sketches, your plans for a studio? He tolerated you because it kept you quiet. Mother only ever wanted you to look pretty and marry well. And me, I made the hard choices. I put my name where it mattered. That is why I signed. I gripped the back of the chair opposite his desk to keep from trembling. So this was your plan all along. Let me take the fall while you hand the company to the Whitmores. Andrew smirked. Exactly. And once you marry Daniel, the pieces fall perfectly. The Whitmores get control, I keep my position, and you get to wear diamonds and play the dutiful wife. Everybody wins. Well, almost everybody. His words cut deeper than any blade. You are my brother, I whispered. How can you say this to me? He rose from the chair and walked around the desk, stopping inches from me. Because I am telling you the truth. Father never chose you. Mother never chose you. And I never will. This company is mine. You were always the spare piece, the decoration. That is all you will ever be. My vision blurred, but I held my ground. One day you will regret this. Andrew chuckled, stepping back toward his desk. Regret? Hardly. I am on the winning side. You should thank me for keeping you useful. Without me, you would be nothing at all. I let the silence stretch long enough for him to believe he had broken me. Then I turned and walked out, my nails digging crescents into my palms. As soon as the heavy door closed behind me, I pressed a hand to my pocket, feeling the warmth of the phone still recording. His voice, his confession, every poisonous word was captured. In the corridor, the weight of it settled on me. My brother, my blood, had chosen greed over me, over loyalty, over anything human. The pain clawed through me, but beneath it pulsed a different current. For the first time, I had something real, something undeniable. I stepped into the elevator and leaned against the mirrored wall, listening to the echo of Andrew's words in my mind. They hurt like fire, but they were also proof. And proof could be turned into power. When the doors opened to the empty lobby, I walked out into the cool night, clutching my phone like a weapon. For years, I had been powerless. Now I carried the first piece of ammunition that could finally change everything. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories. Chapter 6. The Ultimatum. The ballroom at the Four Seasons in Boston glittered with chandeliers and gold trim, every table draped in white linen and heavy with roses. Guests filled the seats in their tuxedos and gowns, cameras flashing as journalists whispered at the edges of the crowd. My gown was ivory silk, tailored within an inch of suffocation, and my mother adjusted the veil as if arranging a centerpiece. My father stood beside Daniel Whitmore, all smiles for the photographers, and Barbara's gaze swept across the room with the satisfaction of a general surveying conquered ground. The officiant cleared his throat, motioning for the ceremony to begin. Daniel reached for my hand with his rehearsed smile. My heart pounded so loudly I thought the microphone hidden in the archway would pick it up. I stepped forward, the weight of the small recorder in my bouquet steadying me. When the officiant asked us to join hands, I pulled mine away. A ripple moved through the guests. I turned to the crowd, lifted the microphone from its stand, and drew in a breath that tasted like fire. There is something you all need to hear. Gasps echoed. My father's face drained of color. My mother hissed, Elena, not now. I pressed the button on the recorder. Andrew's voice filled the hall, sharp and smug, spilling from the speakers. I signed. The Whitmores have vision. They have money. With them, Mercer and Cole has a future. Father sees it. Mother sees it. You are the only one clinging to some fantasy that you matter. You were always the decoration. That is all you will ever be. The ballroom fell silent except for Andrew's recorded laugh. Every word carved across the room like a blade. Reporters scrambled for their recorders, cameras flashing wildly. Andrew shot to his feet, his face blotched red. This is taken out of context, he shouted. I held up the folder of documents Claire and I had copied, my voice trembling but steady. Context is here. Fraudulent transfers, shell projects, millions stolen while you all prepared to sell me off like collateral. This marriage was never about family. It was about control, about theft. Barbara's eyes narrowed to slits. She turned to Daniel, her voice clipped. Did you know she had this? Daniel's polished mask cracked for just a moment. She is bluffing. She has nothing that will hold in court. I shook my head. Try me. Every email, every draft agreement, every dollar siphoned from Mercer and Cole's accounts. And the confession you just heard, it is all real. And now the world knows. The crowd erupted. Guests murmured. Some stood in shock. Reporters shouted questions. My father's jaw worked soundlessly, his face ashen. My mother clutched her pearls, eyes darting desperately toward the exits. Barbara snapped her clutch closed with a snap that echoed louder than the applause had. This is over, she spat and swept from the stage, her heels striking the marble floor like gunfire. Daniel followed quickly, his jaw tight, refusing to meet my gaze. Andrew lunged forward, trying to snatch the papers from my hands. Security moved between us, blocking him. His voice cracked with fury. You think this will save you? You think one recording makes you powerful? You just destroyed us all. I met his glare. No, Andrew, you destroyed us. I am just done being silent. My father finally found his voice, but it was weak. Elena, put the microphone down. We can fix this privately. Not here, not like this. The reporters shouted louder, flashing bulbs painting the room in bursts of light. I lowered the microphone slowly. My hands were shaking so hard the bouquet nearly slipped. But I forced my spine straight, my eyes clear. For the first time, I was not the daughter who obeyed, the sister who stayed quiet. The officiant stood frozen, clutching his book to his chest. Guests began filing out, some whispering, others shaking their heads. My mother reached for me, her hand trembling. What have you done? She whispered. I stepped back, clutching the documents to my chest. I told the truth. That is all I have ever wanted. The ballroom dissolved into chaos. Journalists rushed toward the exits to file stories. Guests hurried to their cars. The string quartet had stopped playing mid-note. I walked down the aisle alone, the train of my gown dragging like a shadow. Outside the hotel, the night air struck cool against my flushed skin. I could hear the chatter already spilling onto the streets, phones ringing, headlines being drafted in real time. Inside, my family's empire had cracked under the weight of its own lies. By morning, the stock price of Mercer and Cole plummeted. News anchors replayed Andrew's voice on every station. Analysts dissected the fraud. Commentators speculated on indictments. Investors pulled back. Partners demanded answers. And whispers of bankruptcy rippled across Boston's financial district. I sat by the hotel window, veil tossed on the table, gown still clinging uncomfortably to my skin. Watching the city lights blur through tears, I refused to let fall. My chest rose and fell with something that was part fear, part relief. The cage had splintered. But I knew the storm had only just begun. Chapter 7. The Ultimatum. The weeks that followed were a blur of headlines and subpoenas. Mercer and Cole bled clients. Whitmore Group quietly pulled their promised investment, and investigators circled like vultures. My father stopped going into the office. My mother refused to leave the house. And Andrew's name was whispered in every financial column as the man who had gambled too far. It was during that chaos that Michael Carter appeared again. I had not seen him in nearly a decade, but when he stepped into Claire's office, the air shifted. He carried the same steady presence, but his suit was sharper, his eyes calmer, his voice lower with the weight of years of courtroom battles. Elena, he said gently, and for a moment I could not breathe. I forced myself to stand, to meet him without letting the flood of memories drown me. Michael, I did not expect you. Claire smiled faintly. I called him. We need someone with courtroom teeth, and he is one of the best in financial litigation now. Michael set a file on the table. I read everything Claire sent me. The contracts, the transfers, the recording. You have a case strong enough to bring the whole structure down, but you need to be ready for war. The Whitmores will fight, Andrew will lie, and your parents will beg you to back down. I swallowed hard. I am ready. I cannot let them bury me again. 2 weeks later, we were in Boston Superior Court. The building's stone columns loomed as we walked up the steps, the weight of history pressing on my shoulders. Inside, the air was cold, humming with quiet conversations and shuffling papers. Andrew sat at the respondent's table in a navy suit that failed to disguise the sweat on his brow. Richard and Margaret sat behind him, stiff and pale. Barbara and Daniel did not appear. Their attorneys represented them, their faces carefully blank. When proceedings began, Michael rose, his voice clear and firm. He laid out the evidence methodically, each exhibit projected on the screen. The fraudulent transfers, the shell companies, the draft agreements. Finally, he played the recording. Andrew's voice filled the courtroom, arrogant and undeniable. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge leaned forward, expression hardening. Andrew shifted in his seat, his jaw clenching. When cross-examination came, Michael stepped closer to Hitz, his tone sharpened like steel. Mr. Mercer, did you authorize transfers totaling $8 million into companies that do not exist? Andrew's mouth opened, then closed. Those were strategic investments. Market volatility, Michael cut in. Strategic investments with no employees, no physical address, no permits, and accounts that lead back to your personal holdings. Is that volatility, or is that theft? The courtroom murmured. Andrew flushed, gripping the edge of the table. It was necessary. We needed liquidity. Father approved. Richard jerked as if struck, but remained silent. Michael pressed forward. So your father knew you were funneling millions out of Mercer and Cole into shells you controlled? Or is it that you acted alone and now wish to drag him down with you? Andrew stammered, sweat sliding down his temple. The judge banged his gavel for silence. My pulse raced, but I kept my eyes fixed on him. The man who had mocked me, who had said I was nothing more than decoration, was unraveling in front of the world. By the end of the day, the judge issued an emergency order freezing all assets of Mercer and Cole. Independent auditors were appointed. A criminal investigation was opened against Andrew, and the Whitmore contracts were suspended pending review. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones thrust forward, questions flying. Ms. Mercer, did you expect this outcome? Will you take over the company? What does this mean for your family? I pushed past them, my voice quiet but steady. It means the truth matters. That night, Richard and Margaret came to me. We sat in the parlor of the house that no longer felt like home. My father's voice was hoarse. Elena, you made your point. But the company cannot survive without leadership. The board is panicking. Clients are fleeing. If you do not step in now, everything will collapse. My mother reached for my hand, her fingers trembling. Please, do something. Save us. I looked at them, the parents who had chosen power over me, who had traded my future for their pride. For a long time, I said nothing. Then I whispered, I will not save the company for you. I will save it for me. A week later, the board convened in the glass tower downtown. The long mahogany table gleamed under the lights. Every director sat tense, waiting. I entered with Claire on one side and Michael on the other. The chair at the head of the table, once reserved for my father, stood empty. I took that seat. The room fell silent. Papers rustled, throats cleared, but no one challenged me. For the first time in my life, I was not an accessory. I was not a bargaining chip. I was the one in control. As I placed the files before me and looked around at the faces of men who had underestimated me for years, I felt the weight of history shift. The storm had broken, but for the first time, the winds were in my favor. Chapter 8. The Ultimatum. The year drew toward its end, and with it came a sharp Boston winter that felt cleaner than any air I had breathed in years. For the first time, I did not feel suffocated by the walls of my family's home or the marble corridors of Mercer and Cole. Instead, I walked each morning toward a small brick building on Tremont Street, where my dream had finally taken shape. The building was modest compared to the skyscrapers downtown, but it had wide glass windows that poured light into the rooms. Above the entrance, a polished brass sign gleamed. Mercer's Studio. The name was not about legacy anymore. It was about reclaiming what had always been mine. Inside, the space buzzed with energy. Drafting tables were lined with sketches, models, and color palettes. Young designers moved quickly through the open floor, their voices full of ideas and laughter. Claire was there almost every day, offering sharp legal advice, but also celebrating every small victory with me. On opening day, she stood beside me in her winter coat, smiling as she looked around. "You did it, Elena," she said, her eyes shining. "They tried to bury you, but here you are. This place breathes because of you." I exhaled slowly, letting the words settle. I almost let them take it away from me forever. Not anymore. That evening, the studio filled with guests for the launch party. Clients, friends, and a handful of journalists came to see the designs. The walls displayed furniture that carried my signature style, pieces I had once only imagined during sleepless nights. Aunt Linda arrived carrying a bouquet of winter roses. She kissed my cheek warmly. "Your grandmother would be proud," she whispered. "She always told me you had fire in you." Her words wrapped around my heart like a blanket. Michael appeared later, slipping through the door in a dark suit that fit him like it had been made for this night. For a moment, time collapsed, and I saw the boy who had walked me home from RISD, who had believed in my sketches before anyone else. He walked closer, his voice steady. "You built it. You turned the drawings into walls and light." I nodded, my throat tight. "It feels real this time. Not hidden, not stolen." He smiled faintly. "I told you once you could do anything. I meant it then, and I mean it now." The party carried on with laughter, but I felt the ghosts of the past circling. Not everyone had cause to celebrate. Andrew was no longer free. After months of investigation, the court convicted him of financial fraud. He sat stone-faced as the judge handed down the sentence. The man who had mocked me as decoration now wore prison blues, his arrogance replaced by silence. Barbara and Daniel vanished from the financial pages. Investors abandoned them, projects collapsed, and the power they flaunted evaporated. The empire they tried to buy through me turned to ash. Richard and Margaret withdrew into shadows. My father resigned, unable to face the shareholders he had deceived. My mother no longer hosted grand dinners or charity galas. The house that once echoed with voices now felt empty, its silence heavier than any rebuke. When I visited, the air was thick with regret. They did not speak of legacy anymore. Only apologies that came too late. At Mercer & Cole, change had begun. With Michael and Claire at my side, we restructured the board. I insisted on transparency and accountability. No gilded thrones, no unchecked authority. At the long table where my father once ruled, each chair was equal. For the first time, employees felt their voices mattered. The company began to heal, not under a single iron hand, but through balance. One morning I walked into that boardroom, the Charles River gleaming outside the tall windows. I set my bag on the table and looked around at the faces of directors who had once ignored me. Now they listened, some with hesitation, others with quiet respect. My father's old seat had been removed. Its absence was a reminder that power had shifted. I spoke clearly. This company survives because truth finally came to light. We cannot go back to silence. We will move forward, or we will fall together. There is no other way. The room nodded in agreement. For the first time, I felt like a leader. Not because of inheritance, not because of family, but because I had earned it. That evening, I returned to the studio. The last of my employees had gone home, leaving the space quiet. I walked slowly through the open room, my fingers trailing across polished wood tables I had designed myself. Lamps cast warm pools of light over fabric swatches and clay models. The smell of cedar lingered in the air. I paused at my old college sketchbook, displayed in a glass frame on the wall. The faded logo design stared back at me, a reminder of the girl I once was. She had been silenced, dismissed, nearly erased. Now her dreams stood around me in brick and glass. I whispered softly. They tried to convince me I was nothing, but I chose to believe I was something. Michael came up beside me, his presence grounding. He said quietly, "You are more than something. You are everything they said you could never be." I turned to him, gratitude heavy in my chest. I am free, Michael. For the first time in my life, I am free. Outside, snow began to fall against the windows, dusting the street in silver. I locked the studio door, stood for a moment watching the flakes drift under the streetlights, and let the cold air fill my lungs. I had fought my family, their lies, their chains, and I had survived. More than that, I had built something they could never touch. I spoke the question aloud, my voice steady and sure. If it were you, would you choose the family that chains you? Or would you choose yourself, even if it meant walking away? Would you choose their way or your freedom?